Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Let's go ahead and get started with the webinar here. My name is Pierre Harry, and I'm a product specialist with Aviva Select California, which is your local Aviva channel partner here in California, like Luke and Matt mentioned. And in this 30-minute or so webinar, I'll be talking about Historian Client 2023. So just a quick look at the agenda here. We're going to kick things off with this PowerPoint where I will kind of provide some essential background to the software because I realize that many of you are probably just here to hear about the 2023 updates to the software, but we might have some attendees that aren't familiar with Historian Client to begin with, so I want to give some background for those attendees. So I'll first talk a little bit about the Historian itself, then explain what the different Historian Client tools are, what they're for, and then I'll talk a little bit about the licensing for Historian Client as well. And then I'll dive into a demo of each of these tools to showcase to you guys, what is new with the 2023 version of the software, which was recently released last quarter. And finally, we will end with a Q&A session. Feel free to ask questions in the chat as we go. And my coworker, Alcanza, is here, and she'll be able to answer chats as we go because we have a lot of attendees today. But at the end, I'll also host a Q&A, so I'll make sure that all the questions are answered. All right, so let's start by talking about the Historian. What exactly is the Aviva Historian? The Aviva Historian is essentially a high-performance industrial database for your operational data. It really is this kind of the core SCADA product that allows us to capture our time series data from the plant floor, and then we can visualize it and report on it as needed. This Historian database can either sit on your SCADA network on the plant floor in a tier 1 configuration, or on your business network in what we call a tier 2 configuration. Wherever this Historian is located, though, it will allow you to collect your operational data from the field, and then you can store it in an efficient manner for later retrieval. And you can actually see some of the performance metrics of the Historian on the bottom here, such as the data compression scale and reduction in storage space. So this kind of demonstrates just how useful and powerful the Historian is compared to other traditional data repositories like SQL databases, for example. But the focus of this webinar isn't the Historian itself, it's the Historian client. So what is the Historian client? Let's introduce it now. Well, like I mentioned in the last slide, the Historian stores your operational data while allowing for efficient retrieval, right? And that's what the Historian client tools do, is they retrieve the data that's in the Historian. So you can think of the Historian as the back-end storage tool, while Historian client is the front-end visualization package to retrieve and report on the data that's in the Historian. And I say package because the Historian client isn't just one particular tool, it's actually a suite of tools. There's actually 4 of them, and you can see them on this page here. You have Historian Client Trend, Historian Client Query, Historian Client Web, and Historian Client Excel Addin. All 4 of them together comprise the Historian client. Now, you might wonder, what is special about these tools compared to other reporting tools like Aviva Reports or, Aviva Pi or even Aviva Insight, right? Well, I'll dive into the specifics of each tool in the webinar, but the big thing to point out now is that these tools are tailored specifically towards Historian data. So they're in essence meant to be uniquely paired up, with the Historian. So while there's other tools out there that, you can use to report on Historian data, these 4 tools here specifically will enable you to do it in the most streamlined and efficient way, specifically for Historian data. So let's briefly introduce each of the tools, even though we'll be diving into them during the demo portion of the webinar. So the first one is the Historian Client Trend. So the trend client is, essentially a graphing tool for trend analysis. So you can use it to extract tags from your Historian and display them on line graphs, as you can see on the right side here. And then the tool allows you to, kind of exert high-level control over how the charts look to fine-tune your trend report. So you have full control over how the charts will look, and we'll see how during the demo portion. Then you have Historian Client Query. So this is an underrated tool. Not a lot of customers use it, but it's actually very useful. It's a query generation tool that allows you to build out SQL code without actually needing to know how to code in SQL. So to do this, you just need to select your historian data and check off some boxes, which you can see on the right side in the columns pane right there. And once you check off the boxes, you configure what you want your SQL code to look like. So the boxes that you check off in the columns pane on the right side will build out the SQL code that you see on the results pane on the bottom right. And we'll see how that works during the demo. The third tool is the Excel add-in. So this isn't a separate, software tool. It's an integration add-on inside of Excel. So when you download it, it will add a pane inside of the toolbar of Excel. So what it does is it adds some wizards that are tailored towards the historian for building out tabular reports. And with 2023, there's actually a 32-bit version of this as well as a 64-bit version. So that's pretty new with this version of Historian Client. And that's the one that I'll be focusing on during the demo. And you can see some of the different types of values that you can calculate, like live values, history values, aggregate values, summary system values, so on and so forth. And last but not least, we have Historian Client Web. So this tool is different from the others because this one is hosted on a web browser, while the previous three, in contrast, are desktop apps. So the Historian Client Web tool is essentially a light version of Aviva Insight. It has a very similar interface and similar capabilities, but it is not hosted in the cloud. Insight is hosted in the cloud. But you can use this app, Historian Client Web, to display historian data using a variety of available charts and unique chart parameters, which allow you to increase the ways that you can analyze your operational data. So it's not just trends like Historian Client Trend. There are more charts that are available, like column charts, status board charts, and so on and so forth, which we'll see during the demo. So I would say that out of the four tools, though, this is the one that has received the biggest improvements with the 2023 update, and we'll see that in the demo. So let's wrap up this PowerPoint by talking about licensing really quickly. So how is Historian Client licensed? Well, Historian Client, like many of our other products, can be licensed in two different flavors. You have perpetual or flex through our flex program. In both cases, it is on a concurrent user basis. So what I mean by that is that you purchase how many individual users can use it at the same time. And you can purchase individual users or discounted packs of 5 users, 10 users, 20 users, so on and so forth. Whatever makes sense for how many users you anticipate needing to use the Historian Client. For both perpetual and flex, there are ways to get Historian Client licenses as part of package deals. So for perpetual, each Historian Client license each historian license rather comes with a Historian Client Web license. So if you purchase a Historian Client license, you'll get Historian Client Web automatically. Although for the other three tools, Trend, Query, and Excel Addin, you would need to purchase a separate license. But you get a free Historian Client Web license with a historian license. But Flex specifically has some more generous packages, which are good incentives to switch to the Flex program in the first place. So you'll actually get Historian Client licenses as part of exclusive Flex bundles like Operations Control, Application Platform is another one, which is a system platform package. Both of those Flex bundles are unique through Flex, and they will unlock the Historian Client as well. Now, of course, in all cases, right, each of the cases I explained, one of the prerequisites for Historian Client is that you have a historian license, right? You need a historian to use Historian Client because remember that the Historian Client tools are tailored specifically for historian data, and so they need the historian as the data source. Otherwise, they won't work in a vacuum. All right, so that's it for the PowerPoint, and let's go ahead and jump into the juicy stuff and take a look at some demos here. So give me a second while I share my screen here. All right, I'm pulling up the demo environment. And let's go ahead and share. Can everyone see my new screen? I'm sharing a VM that has a few desktop apps on the bottom.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Luke. So now let's do some demos. So we're going to go ahead and open up our first tool, which is Historian Client Trend. So to access these tools, once the package has been installed and licensed, we'll go to our Start menu, and there's going to be an Aviva Historian folder. And you'll see that you have a few options here: administration, configuration, export, and import, data import. And then you have your three tools: Historian Client Web, Query, and Trend. So let's go ahead and click on Trend. And remember that Trend, Query, and the Excel add-in are desktop tools. So if I click on the Trend shortcut here, it will launch the Trend software. Okay. I'll give it a second while it's loading. Okay, so the first thing you'll notice is that Historian Client Web, Historian Client Trend 2023 has received an interface update. Oh, hello, can anyone hear? Hello?
Apologies. Pierre, I think you froze up for a second there.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now you're coming in clear. I think it's what you talked about earlier.
Yeah, sorry guys, I occasionally have some network blips, but it looks like we're good.
The last like 30 seconds of what you said didn't come through.
No problem. So yeah, I just opened up Historian Client Trend here, and the first thing you'll see for users that are already familiar with it is that there is a refreshed interface. So the ribbon on top is different than it was before, and this is the 2023 update to this tool. When before you had a pane above it that was embedded, now you have a ribbon with you have chart control tool sets that are distributed across different categories. So you have a home tab, chart tab, view tab, tools tab, and windows tab. So, I think this is a really good update, because when before the buttons were on a single pane, it was sometimes hard to, find which tools you were looking for. But now it's spread out strategically and organized in a way that makes sense. So for those of you that are new to this tool, let's kind of explore the workflow of how you would build out a trend. So remember what I said about the historian client being tailored towards the historian, right? This is where you'll see that in action. The first step involves selecting the tags that you want to display on your trend. So to do that, we're going to use the tag picker that's on the left side here. And the top part of that tag picker is the server pane. And this is where you just highlight the historian node that you want to extract data from. So I only have one node here, but obviously if you wanted to, you could select from multiple nodes if your architecture calls for it. But in this case, I'm just pointing to this node, localhost. That's where the historian is. And you can expand the node to see some folders like private and private group folders. And what these are their tag categories that allow you to filter tags that you're looking for. So if I go to public groups, all analog summary tags, all analog tags, you'll see that the tag list on the bottom gets updated based on my selection. And you can also create custom folders like pressure tags, system performance, time tags that I created earlier. And this really just gives you control over how you want to categorize your tags by group if you have a lot of them, because I know some historians have tons of tags, thousands. And so organizing them by group makes it really easy to then find the tags that you want. But in our case, we're just going to highlight localhost to select all of them. And once you've highlighted it, you can then select the tags on the tag pane on the bottom as it's listed here. And below that, we actually have a filter pane as well that allows us to search for specific tags by tag name, description, IO address, for example. So if I enter temperature in the description, for example, and then click apply, oh, I misspelled temperature. You'll see that the tags that have temperature in their description will be filtered, and we'll only see those. So the same is true if I do it for, the tag name, or if I search by or filter by IO address as well. So let's go ahead and plot some tags. Let's go ahead and just select a couple here. Let's do this one, for example. And let's do a analog. So you saw what I did is I just selected the tag and then just dragged it across, and it plotted it on my trend. And as you can see, you can select multiple tags, not just one, and plot them on the same trend here. All we needed to do was just drag and drop. It's really easy to select your tag and plot it. So now that we've been able to plot the tags on the trend chart, we can configure some parameters that will allow us to change how this chart looks. So the big one I want to show you guys is the time frame on top right here. So you can see that there's a time frame selected from the 26th of January, which is today, 11:15 a.m. to 11:20 a.m. And the middle shows the time difference between the two. So it's showing the last 5 minutes of data updating in real time. But you can actually update this and manipulate the time frame. If, for example, I wanted to do last 30 minutes, I could do that. And you'll see that the tag will update and the start time will change to 10:51 a.m. to now 11:21 a.m. So last 30 minutes, right? And then, I could also just manually change the time like this. So I changed it to 11:15 a.m. as the endpoint. So really, this just gives you control over the time frame and what historical data you're seeing over what time for these tags. And one thing I could do too is enable or disable live mode. And so if I click on that, what it will do is it will refresh the trend automatically to reflect the real-time data. So if you look at the x-axis of this trend, right, you can see the different time increments. And on the right side, you'll see the latest time, 11:16 a.m., which is updating to the current time. So now we're seeing the real-time data. So as you can see, this is a really easy way to quickly extract either real-time data or historical data, depending on what your needs are. So these trends can be static or dynamic. So some other parameters that are possible, you can manipulate, the y-axis, so it's stacked, for example. So let's go ahead and do that. You can scale it up or down, do a stacked axis, right? Because I have two tags, right? So one of the tags has one unit while the other has another unit. So this just stacks them. This makes it a single, scatter, right? You have some different options here. And one thing I wanted to mention too is that if you're an InTouch user, there's a utility to export these trends and embed them onto your InTouch screens. So I just wanted to mention that because that's an often forgotten fact that is really useful. So that's it for trend. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Let's talk a little bit about query. So same thing, I'll go to Viva Historian, click on query. That will launch it. And same thing as trend, the query tool, the main update with 2023 is the new interface. So it's a similar look and feel to the trend tool with an updated ribbon on top with different categories for the options. And also similar to trend, you have the tag picker on the left side. So it's the same one for selecting your tags. And so you'll notice that there's a column pane in the middle as well as the results pane underneath it. So the columns pane is where you check off the boxes based on the options that are presented to you to build out the SQL code. So right now I have agitator 001.speed.pv. That's the tag that I have selected. And I have some options here for a description, storage rate, storage type, so on and so forth. The ones that I have checked off are the ones that are built out in the SQL code. So if I, for example, I were to check off date created, it will add date created to the select function right here inside of the SQL code. So checking these off as I go will build out the SQL code and then also show you a data table right here to show how the data will work and the display of the SQL code with the different columns built out right here. And you're not just limited to the options that are right here under the column section. You can actually go to the query tab, select the drop down for type of query, and then select some different options, which will unlock different checkboxes and different SQL code generation capabilities. So for example, I can select analog statistics, and you'll see that there's a different set of options under the columns area right here, right? And it's the same thing, right? If I were to check off some additional options, it will add it to the SQL code on the bottom. So this is really useful if you know, in a pinch, you need to generate some SQL code, or, if you don't know how to write SQL code, for example, you can use this tool right here to select your historian tag, choose what type of query you want to generate based on these options, aggregate values, analog statistics, history values, for example, and then you check off the boxes, build out the SQL code, and then at that point, you can copy and paste the SQL code elsewhere. So if you're using a third-party tool that uses SQL, for example, you could paste it there, or paste it into SQL Server Management Studio, for example. So that's what this query tool is useful for. It's for generating the SQL code really quickly and efficiently. All right, so next, moving along, let's talk about web. So if you remember, web is the one historian client tool that is not a desktop app. It is a browser-based application. So if I go back to the View the Historian folder and then launch Historian Client Web, it will open up a web browser. So if you are an Aviva Insight user, this will look familiar to you, right? Because it's a very similar interface, same look and feel, but it's not hosted on the cloud, right? The Aviva, the Historian Client Web is hosted on a local web browser and not the cloud like Insight is. And it also doesn't have the same analytics tools that Insight has, but it has very similar capabilities. So the first thing I'll point out is that you can use Historian Client Web to see your historian alarms. If I click on the hamburger icon on the top left and then click on alarms, that will populate the list of active alarms as defined inside of the historian. So it's a one-to-one connection. All the historian alarm data that's inside your historian will be viewable inside of Historian Client Web right here. So that's one of the main features of it. The other thing that you can do with Historian Client Web, which we saw on the home page here, is creating some charts and some graphs. The four that you'll see here under the suggested content tab are the most recent 4 pieces of content that were developed on this page. So I can click on one of them to view them, for example. Let's click on new line chart, and that will show us this chart that uses 3 historian tags. On the bottom, we can see them, 001, 002, and 003, and the units are gallons. And what we can do is we can click on Show Gallery on the right side to choose between different graph options, like status board, for example, which shows current value, which way the trend is going up or down, and the look of the trend as well. We also have some column charts, detail grid, really whatever makes sense for the particular data that you want to plot and visualize. And the way you create this content is that you search for a specific tag. So for example, let's search for agitator 001.pv, select it, and then that will generate the content for that tag. And then same thing, we can choose if we want to put it on the line chart or a column chart. This is this shows that the valve is either running or stopped. So line chart doesn't really make sense for this one. So if we could have column chart, for example, it's not supported for this tag type, but if it was, then you would see some columns as well. So that's how you build out the content. Another feature that Historian Client Web has is dashboards. So once you've created different contents, instead of viewing just one at a time, you can create dashboards and view them all on a single dashboard. So this dashboard, TV dashboard, which is my coworker Tim Brose created it. These are his initials. It has 3 contents on the same dashboard: a new detail grid, level column chart, level line chart. And so this is really useful if you want to, tailor specific tag information to certain, members of your organization, right? Maybe different operators might need to see different information, different data. This is where you could create custom dashboards for those specific people. And then, so a couple things that are new with 2023. So one of the big ones here is that there is now a ad hoc expression option. And so the way this works is you can create on-the-fly calculations with your tags. And this is useful because, not only can you create, on-the-fly calculations, like if you wanted to, average out tags, for example, sum them, whatever you need to do, but this doesn't consume a historian tag. It's just an on-the-fly calculation that isn't stored in the backend, so it doesn't consume any historian tags. And so some of the options of expressions that you can do, these include, some scalar options. You can do, what else? Some arithmetic options, statistical operations, time series calculations, so on and so forth. So let's do one as an example. Let's do an average, for example, of, let's do agitator 001.pv, and then agitator 002.pv, and then it's going to ask me for the time interval. Let's do it over the course of a day. Here. Give me a second while I'm doing this here. There we go. And hold on, let me start this over. Average is agitator 001.pv, and then we'll do plus agitator 202.pv, and then let's just do this. There you go. So I had entered it wrong initially, but the way this function works is it takes the averages of agitator 001.pv plus agitator 002.pv, and then that's the time interval after the comma. So it's over the course of a day, and then that's the calculated value right here, right? And then obviously this expression is kind of confusing to look at, right? So what you could do is you can actually edit it and create an alias. So I can rename it to averages instead. So for example, averages of 001.pv and 002.pv, and save it. And so now this alias is searchable, and you can really, quickly build out content based on this calculation on the fly. So this is something that's new with 2023. Another thing that's new is that you can also now go to the modern look. So what we're looking at is the classic look, but you can go to the modern look. So this is similar to Insight. Insight is the same thing. There's a new look, new user experience that is available, and you can go back and forth inside of Insight, and you can also go back and forth inside of Historian Client Web. So a lot of the options are similar, but there are some added capabilities. I won't go into them, but this is how you would navigate between both. So there's a new look, a modern look, and a classic look, and you could choose between both and choose which one to use to develop inside a historian client web. All right, so I'm already a little bit over. Let's wrap up with Excel add-in, and then we'll go into the Q&A. So this is the last tool. It's the Excel add-in. So like I mentioned, this one is not a unique software tool in that it's not its own product. This one is integrated inside of Excel. So to access it, you open Excel, and then it will be available as an add-in inside of there. And we can see it on the right side here. There's a Aviva Historian add-in with some different options on the right side. And so this might look kind of, this will look new to a lot of traditional users because the way this one looks is different, right? Previously, the Historian Excel add-in was a tab that you could access inside of the ribbon, right? Which when you click on the tab, you would see the wizards underneath it. But now it's actually a task pane right here on the home tab. And the reason for this is that what I'm showing you guys is a 64-bit version. So remember that the 32-bit and 64-bit versions are now available with the 2023 version of this software, when previously it was only 32-bit. But since the 64-bit is a new option here, this is what I'm going to show you guys today. But do remember that 32-bit is also still available with 2023. So you can pick between both depending on your Excel environment. So let's go ahead and start by, oh yeah, one more thing too, actually. This will look familiar to you, this demo. If you use Aviva Pi and you use Data Link, this will look a lot more similar to Pi Data Link. And what I mean by that is if I select one of these options and you start with tag search, the wizard, instead of being a pop-up box that's in the middle, like with the 32-bit version, it will be, a pane that's on the right side right here. So it's very similar to Pi Data Link. And so this is the first step. I clicked on tag search. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to search for a tag. So let's go ahead and let's do agitator. Let's do the same one we were doing before. 002 dot. Let's do a speed one. I'm going to go ahead and check this off and click on add. And what this will do is it will select the tag from the historian, right? Because that's the first step, is selecting the tag. And then I could choose tag direction, down, or across. Let's actually select a couple tags. Let's do this one, agitator 003. And then we'll do down, and you can choose some sort by options, as well as if you want it ascending or descending, if you do multiple ones. And once I click on finish, it will populate the two cells here and indicate that this is the tag that you embedded inside of the Excel spreadsheet. And the reason we need to embed it here, right, search for it to embed it, and you can do multiple tags, is so that later, if you want tag information, single value, and some additional reports, you point towards this tag name right here in this cell to generate it. So for example, now if I do tag information, I can go ahead and choose the tag. So I have to specify, the cell. So sheet 1, A2 right here. And so the 64-bit version is a little bit smarter than the 32-bit version in the sense that previously you actually had to enter this in manually to point to the cell where the tag name was with the 32-bit, but the 64-bit version will do that automatically. So it will infer, which tag you're talking about or that you want to reference based on the ones that are already on the spreadsheet. So as you can see, I didn't need to enter anything. It automatically populated it. And then I select which cell I want to display the results in. So it'll be sheet 1, B1. So it'll paste it on the right side of the two cells that I have shown right here. And I can select the details that I want to see. So for example, description, engineering unit, and alias. So let's go ahead and leave those default and click on finish. And there you go. Now you can see that I'm building out the report slowly by using these different 64-bit wizards right here. So now we can see the description of the tag as well as the engineering unit. And there's no alias for this tag, but if there was, it would be populated in there. And so now let's do, a single value report. So again, it's a smart wizard, so it knows which tag I'm referring to, the one in A2 in cell A2. And it also knows which cell is available. So in this case, it's E1. So what we're going to do is we're using the single value wizard right here. So what this will do is it will, report the single value of this tag based on, the time selection that I select right here. So for example, I could do, a historical time reference if I wanted to, or just do one that's real time. And the way I would do real time is select time selection now, and then click on finish. And then what that did is it pasted the value of the tag, which is 0, as well as the timestamp right here. So January 26th, 11:39 a.m., which is the time right now, which reminds me that I'm actually falling behind a little bit on time. So yeah, that's how the 64-bit version of the Excel add-in works, right? So remember that it's still available in 32-bit version with 2023, right? But I just wanted to show you guys the 64-bit version since this is exclusive to 2023. And you can see some of the other options. You can do periodic numeric reports, time and state reports, and detailed value reports. So same as the 32-bit version. All right, so it's 11:40, so I'm about 10 minutes over. So I'm going to wrap this up. So we'll end here with a Q&A session. I think my coworker Alcanza was able to answer all the questions in chat. But if not, feel free to ask some more questions. And Kyle and Annie, I don't know if we want to open the board to vocal questions as well, or just leave it to the chat. Up to you guys.
I think we'll have to keep it just to the chat because of the webinar format, but we did have a few questions that have already come in.
Okay.
All right, first question we have is Aviva now using the OSI Soft Pi data historian?
So the OSI Soft data historian is called the Pi Data Archive. I think that's what you're referring to. Mm-hmm. So it's a different type of historian. So the Aviva historian is distinct from it, right? So the Aviva historian is our standard traditional historian that Aviva offers. And then separately, there's also the Pi Data Archive, right? And you can actually use those together, right? So now with 2023, you can actually replicate from the Aviva historian to a Pi Data Archive if your Pi was sitting on your business network, for example. So when previously the architecture, if you wanted a historian on your enterprise network, was a tier 1 Aviva historian on your SCADA network and a tier 2 Aviva historian on your enterprise network, now you can have a tier 1 Aviva historian on your SCADA network with a Pi Data Archive or Pi historian on your business network.
Oh, Pierre, I think you're cutting out again here.
Hello, can you hear me?
I think you're bouncing back, but you're still a little choppy. I think your answer made it through though.
Just in case, I went ahead and promoted it to a panelist, just in case we keep having connection problems.
Oh, okay.
Did we lose Pierre?
I think. Are you back, Pierre? I think he's still chopping out.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there you are.
Okay. Awesome. Hopefully my explanation came through.
Yeah, I think the person who asked is satisfied, which is good.
Okay, awesome. Again, I'm sorry, guys. It's my internet connection issue sometimes.
Okay, we only have a couple more to get through here. We have another question. Can font size for tags be changed in the Trend app?
So are you referring to the font size of the tags that are displayed underneath the trend?
I don't know if Tim Cooper is still around to clarify.
Tim, if you're still there, Tim. Oh, in the picker. That's a good question. I actually haven't tried to do that. I don't think so. Unfortunately, I think that it's locked in. Yeah, I don't think, unfortunately, I don't think you can make that font size bigger. Yeah, but you can try to zoom in if your computer allows you to do that.
Okay, and another question we had pop in just now was, are the feature sets in 32 and 64-bit Excel add-ins the same, or does the 64-bit version have less functionality or more than the 32-bit?
The 64-bit is more streamlined, and there are a couple wizards that have not been incorporated into 64-bit, unfortunately, but it's mostly the same ones.
Awesome. Now, one final question. For the 64-bit version add-in, can you specify the time using a cell reference, like how the tag selection is set up?
Yeah, you can, and I can probably show you guys how to do this right now. Okay, let's go ahead and select a tag again. And then what you could do is, so inside a single value, you can see the time. You can also do a cell reference and then point to the cell that contains your time.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you, Pierre. And thank you to everyone who attended. If anyone would like to review any portion of this webinar, a recording will be available on YouTube and our website, california.avivaselect.com. Once available, you will be receiving a copy of it via email. Thank you for everyone for attending, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.